one we're
just
talking
this
about.
one.
Yep.
So they totaled $800,000 a year, but we'll just consider this one. Okay.
Thank you. Right, we now rip into item 13, Council
Submit a question on the LT.
Greenhouse Gas Emissions Inventory. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Far away, please.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Kerry from the Climate Resilience team, and you'll know Elizabeth from the Strategic Policy team here. We're here to present the results of the Council's organisational greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the financial year 2022-2023. Last month we presented the results of our district emissions inventory. So this inventory is for our own organisational emissions. It covers all of our operational emissions, including things like wastewater, fuel, electricity, waste, landfill, all those types of things. Our inventory aligns with ISO standard 14064, which is an emissions standard that most councils use and large organisations for accounting for their emissions. It's been independently verified by Toitu, and we're putting the results of the inventory on the public website after this. The inventory covers all emissions from council activities and all the facilities that we own and operate. Operational control is one of the key criterion for whether we include emissions in our inventory or exclude them, and that's essentially, do we have day-to-day control of the everyday decisions of those processes and activities. Our CCOs do their own inventories, so their results are not included in this council inventory. It's the first inventory we've done for several years, and we'll be doing them annually from this point. The inventory covers gross emissions only. That's important to note, so that it doesn't include sequestration from trees at this stage. We're currently going through a process of determining how to determine the amount of sequestration from the trees that we have in council thing, and we'll be looking to include those in future inventories, but they have to align with the standards. It's not just as simple as saying we'll plant 10,000 trees, that'll be X amount of tonnes there. So we're looking at ways to include those in future inventories, and that'll show our net carbon position, because as you know, our council target is net carbon neutral by 2030. We'll also be looking to improve the inventory over time, and this will likely include incorporating things such as staff commute, employee commute, and working from home as that data becomes available. We've also started working on an emissions reduction plan, which will identify key initiatives that we can undertake to help reduce our emissions. Part of this work includes modelling a BAU pathway that will note the likely impact of population growth and also our new facilities as they come online. The emissions reduction plan will essentially highlight the most efficient reduction approaches and essentially what would give the best bang for your buck in terms of emissions reduction potential. So that's the inventory. We're happy to take any questions from you now.
Okay, Councillor Cotter.
Thank you. This is great to see. Talking about sequestration from trees, what about from buildings? And I'm referring to Koinga, the new St Albans Community Centre, which was hailed as sequestering carbon. Do you do buildings, our buildings?
It wouldn't be included in the current inventory. We'd have to look at the standards they require to see if and what quantum of emissions it would sequester. Essentially, yeah, trees are the most common thing that you use, but there are forms of sequestration that we could look into. Although that's not one that would generally be used, I don't think.
Yeah, but we need to look for everything that we can because we're really under the spotlight, as you know. And the other thing is I wanted to talk about the staff commute, and I see that we haven't been able to, insufficient data. So I have got an amendment there, Katie. Did you get my amendment?
Yes.
And I'm wondering if there's a way that we can actually start work on that to collect data on the staff commute, but it could be staff and elected members. But I'm also thinking of adding to that to say, and answer my question if I'm wrong here, but if we could actually put in the questionnaire, are there any other changes to your travel patterns or travel behaviour that is reducing everyone's emissions? For instance, do you now walk to your local supermarket on the weekends outside of work hours? Things like that. Is that possible, or would that just be too hard?
what they do outside of work hours wouldn't be included in this inventory, but we are looking at ways to do a survey or something like that to establish the most common way that people get to work, and you'd probably have to do it a couple of times a year for like winter and
I think so.
summer and those types
Yeah.
of things, and the change of patterns that shows. There are sort of standards for what you can and can't include, so we just need to check that we're able to collect the information in a format that's acceptable for them. But those are the types of things that people do include.
Yeah, so you're about to commence that, are you?
We will look into how we can do that. I don't know if it'll be ready in the next month for the end of this financial year, but we're certainly looking to include that in the future.
And you've got the resourcing to do that?
We'd have to look into that and to see. It would require other teams' contribution potentially, so we'd have to get back to you on what that would entail.
Yeah, I think so. And if resourcing is a problem, I think you should come back to governance and see what we can do to find some more somewhere, because it's really important that we find these savings. Thank you.
Question from Councillor Fields.
Kia ora. Thank you. I must be a bit dumb, because I just really want to get this clear in my head.
Can't argue with some people.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So reducing emissions by half by 2030 and then carbon zero by 2045, they're kind of like two different things, because if we're not accounting for sequestration, then at this stage, right, like, I mean, in emissions, we've reduced emissions by 1%, and can I just quickly ask the question, does that take into account population growth? So is that based on the...
Yeah, so there's
So
two...
for one, and then there's a second part to it. I'll let you ask.
Sorry, the first bit, what you're describing there is our district's emissions. And so those targets for halving by 2030 and to net zero by 2045 are for the wider district, and that's where we came last month in terms of the 1% reduction. Those targets are sort of gross targets, so they don't take into account, or they're not per capita, so they don't account for population growth. It would be like 50% reduction from our baseline gross emissions from that year. In the district, we are counting the trees. It's purely for this organisational one, for essentially an accounting standard for our own organisation. We're not currently including the removals at this stage from trees, but we are looking to include that in future.
Can I just clarify though, is the calculation emissions less sequestration, or is it just gross emissions?
It is, for a net position, it's your emissions minus the sequestration, and that gives you your net position. And so for a council's target, it's net zero by 2030. So that is including we would add in the sequestration from the trees.
Right.
We just don't have those figures in this first inventory because it just wasn't available at the time.
Right. Okay.
Councillor Coker, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a few resolutions to put through and got some really excellent advice back. So I wanted to thank whoever put that all together, which probably took quite a while. I had some questions on that. One was, it says about the council's inventory uses the operational control approach.
Yeah.
I was wondering, well, I think it's clear what that is, but what other approaches are there that we could choose from?
There's two main approaches under the ISO standard, and so one of them is the operational control. That's like the day-to-day operations of the organisation. The other one is financial control. And so you could say if we've got, some companies have subsidiaries, and if they have 90% financial control or 50%, they can set a threshold for, if we've got a certain amount of financial control of that organisation, then we'll include those. If we don't, then we won't include those.
Okay, so that is something that, how would council go about if we were decided to change it to the financial control approach?
We'd just have to look into what those implications would be and what that would include or not include. It is something the council can, or staff can, make a decision on. Like the organisation itself can determine which approach you use. You just need to define that at the start of the process.
Yep. Okay. And then it said, sorry.
Those are on screen, Councillor Coker.
Sorry?
They're on screen.
Oh, great. Yep, thank you. So, I just think it's moving. It said that we could make an amendment to the SOIs could be submitted, so to, I guess, to CCHL by way of shareholder resolution. but then the board of the CCO must be consulted, or maybe to LPC and so on. So what is that process?
Do that, or do you want to talk to Ron?
Yeah, we might need the legal team to advise on that process. It's a separate one, not managed by
Is it by?
policy.
I'm assuming it's by the letter of expectation, but is there a different way?
Through the standard statement of intent process.
Okay. Cool. And then the other question was around the Climate Liberation Aotearoa open letter to central government. Is there a way for that to be, if council feels it hasn't had time to read and consider whether they wanted to sign, to bring that to the next meeting to then consider signing that?
So staff could provide advice on that letter. That's fine. I guess our key message would be the key message in the letter is captured by that submission Councillor Templeton has put forward for the council's consideration today, attached to the mayor's report that you'll be considering later on. That captures that key message around international aviation and shipping. So that would be council statement on that issue that was raised, eloquently this morning by the deputations. That's an opportunity to put the council on record on that matter. We can provide advice on the letter as well. There's other sort of issues raised in that letter that would probably need to get advice from others on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Question from me. On page 285 of our stuff, it's got the results, and it says we've got 33,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide. When it gets down to the fact that it says 17% of our greenhouse gases comes from electricity, is that just the portion, because as you know, everything in the South Island is hydro, is this the portion of power coming back from, say, Huntly or something like that?
Yeah. Essentially it's the proportion of the national grid which isn't, driven by renewable electricity. So it is essentially every year the government authority releases essentially an emissions factor for how much renewable energy on average there is in the network over the year, and all companies use that for their basis.
But in theory, if, as you know, all the power in the South Island is hydro plus a bit of wind.
Yeah.
If all our, are you saying all our power, some of our power that we use here actually comes from North Island South? I thought it all went north, so why is Christchurch not zero if we're in a hydro area?
Yeah, that's just the standard they use. They've sort of said they can't guarantee at any given time that we're not getting power back from the North Island, essentially.
Okay, so if the whole country was renewable,
yeah,
that number would be zero.
That's right. Or if council did its own massive solar farm, for example, and had 100% renewable electricity, that would go right down.
Yeah, right down, but not zero.
Not quite zero, but very close.
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
Okay. One of the other things, and we're talking here about staff commute, staff working from home. On this list, below fuel, which is 15.9, we get into refrigerants and waste and all those things, which are 1% or less. Are you going to be doing one hell of a lot of work to get something that's such a small percentage on the commute or the working from home thing? Like, I'm just looking at how much work you're going to have to do to come up with a number that's tiny.
Yeah, in terms of working from home, it wouldn't be a huge amount of work. It's in terms of surveying staff, I'd imagine, to figure out how they come. And that's, at the moment, we simply do not know what proportion of emissions that would be. It may be 5%, who knows, of those. And so that's part of the work, is to figure out if it's big or not. With our emissions reduction plan, that's one of the things we are looking at across the whole board of all of council's operations, so that we know if we're going to suggest some actions, that it is the best bang for the buck. And so we're not focusing on the 1% or 0.2%. We are focusing on the things which would make the biggest dent into our emissions.
Absolutely, and that's why the wastewater treatment plant is something that we should zero into as much as we possibly can. Yeah. So your team, which I don't know how many are in it, that's all they do all year is work on these numbers, or is
No, that's just a small part of what we do in terms of
sure.
the emissions accounting. And also, there's people from Free Waters and the facilities team and others that really contribute this information as well. So I'd like to acknowledge their input because it is across all of Council's operations. So, so there's this work done on the accounting side and then the emissions reduction side as well. And then the wider climate team obviously does things on the adaptation risk and what we're expecting.
So
in the future and
you wrote this report that's here.
yes, that one.
Very good, thank
Yeah.
you. And then you give it to Tuku, is it?
Toitu
that's
Title
what I thought.
Envirocare.
And they just peer review it, is it?
It's essentially a peer review and an accounting sort of process for accuracy and to check the methodology that we've used against the standards.
Yeah, and the one that you brought to us, sorry, I'm talking too much. The one that you brought to us a month and a half ago, that was
ACOM, and that was the whole district. So that's all of the Christchurch City Council's territorial area, Christchurch and Banks Peninsula. So all the emissions emitted within that area.
Yeah, so we didn't do that; they did it for
ACOM,
us.
ACOM did that on our behalf. Yeah, consultant did that one.
All right, thank you very much. Any more questions, Yanni? Councillor Johansson.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the work that you've done on this. Just wanted to check how our measurement contrasts to other councils' measurements within our Greater Christchurch or Canterbury. Are we using the same system of measurement?
I think Selwyn's also using the ISO standard, and WIMAC, I'm not sure off the top of my head. We have looked at wider Greater Christchurch emissions and conversations with them in terms of standardising some of the ways they account those.
We can check and come back to you.
We can,
I just wondered if there was benefit of having maybe a shared cost around the way in which we do the assessment so that we can save money but also have a contrast. My understanding, the Mayoral Forum's also doing work in climate change, as is Greater Christchurch Partnership.
Yeah, the Mayoral Forum's all of the Canterbury region, so all of the councils in Canterbury.
And do we know how ECAN assess emissions as well? Is it comparable?
They've actually just released one, I think it was last night, on their website. So that's in 2018 and 2021. They've retroactively studied those. And so that's for all of Canterbury, so all of the region. They've focused a lot on air quality, but then built in other emissions into that to come up with a all of Canterbury kind of approach for that one as well.
And just sort of appreciate that this is a level of service. This is also part of our climate change strategy.
Yeah.
The report on the emissions reduction and what we're doing, is that coming to us in July? So that's the opportunity. If people have ideas about what they want us to do to reduce emissions, we'll know what the organisation's focused on and people will be able to see what we're committed to. Is that?
Yeah, in July that the emissions reduction plan is due. We're working with Tonkin and Taylor on that one. That's from very much an organisational focus on what we can do with our operations. So there's wider piece of work that the community might be interested in as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we have no more. Oh, sorry, Aaron. Yeah.
Yeah, so just got three. One of them goes back to Phil's. Can we not get on the electricity one just the amount of, because it never goes to zero because there's the wear and tear and the capex and the opex of running power, so that has a carbon footprint. But South Island's hydro, I've asked multiple times for evidence that the power does come south, and if it does, it would be used up in Blenheim and Kaikoura before it got here. Do you know what I mean? It's a basic equation that I would bet my house that we never use Huntly Power in Christchurch. Like, happy to put my house on the line if someone can prove me wrong, but I'd be shocked. And my wife would be more shocked when we lose the house. We use methane and what? To heat it up. Oh, right, yes, yeah. So that's gas, that's not electricity.
Yeah, that's accounted for separately.
Carry on, please.
Yeah, and then the other one is I can't see a graph here of, because we're going for the net zero by 2030, where we were and where we are, and because we know where we're going. So have we got to where we were?
With the last we did for,
or we'll know in another year,
in 16 to 19, and then we haven't done any for a couple of years in between.
Oh, what was that number?
Those numbers were significantly lower, but there's been a significant change in the wastewater factors for waste. What is it? Water NZ has come up with new, essentially, methodology for New Zealand in the way that all councils and water care and everyone calculates their wastewater emissions. So there's a better understanding of that now. And that essentially, like water care said, their wastewater emissions have essentially doubled. And it's through the methodology more than suddenly the emissions have actual doubled.
And then that'll happen over the next few years. That stuff will be measured different. And finally, our data storage, because it's not here. It used to be just down the road. So obviously, renewable energy, and it's in Aussie, which is only it's less than a third renewables. So is that calculated in here? Because data storage is as much as air travel globally. So I'm picking the council has a reasonable amount that we.
I couldn't answer that immediately. I don't know where we store our data, but if it's in Australia, but essentially it would be all we would be counting for this purpose would be the electricity that we use for our data, for our computers and all those types of things in the office.
Only in-house?
Essentially, the in-house operational stuff. So if
Thank you.
But globally, that's as big a problem as air travel, and it's set to get worse. It's set to double. So I think we should be measuring it, or at least find out if we can. Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Templeton?
Thanks. I'd be happy if Councillor Keown put up an amendment to include emissions from data storage. So there's a couple of things. One thing is a recent decision by the International Accounting Standards Board on accounting for offsets when it comes to emissions. And I've had an initial email response to my LTP question, and I'm trying to get it around my head. So we currently have our emissions profile, and we've got some projected emissions over time through the life of the LTP, because we've got more facilities coming online, that kind of thing. But we're still working on the tree assessment, so we don't know what the difference between our sequestration ability and our emissions is going to be. Is that right?
that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are we going to know that in the next few months, or?
Yes, I think the timeline.
Yeah, hopefully in the next few months we'll understand what that looks like in terms of the actual emissions and how much is being sequestrated.
So that net figure.
Yeah, the net figure.
And so we will then be able to do what the standards expect and actually account for purchase of the offsets from 2030 onwards if we need to.
If we needed to at the moment.
Like if we're going to be,
Because at the moment our focus is to reduce the emissions and then
100%.
obviously count what trees we already have and what trees we're planting and what we're estimating to be planting before 2030.
Yeah.
And then if there was the gap, then we'd have to look at other alternatives.
Yeah. And at that point we get to make a choice. So we could say, well, if it's looking like $200,000 in 2030 for our offsets for the difference, we could make a choice between looking ahead and having to pay that, or spending that money earlier to plant trees that would then offset it. I mean, we wouldn't need to pay, for example. Is that right? That's the kind of choices we're going to have?
That would be a future choice that you
Yeah.
might need to make when we have more certainty around whether there is a gap or whether we're actually in a good position to do it. But there are different options to potentially look into there.
Yeah. And the data storage, is that scope 2 or 3?
That would be scope 3 as far as I would understand, but I'd have to get back
because
to
it's
you
not sort of commute stuff,
that.
but it is
Yeah,
emissions from stuff that we actually procure.
would use,
Yeah,
it would be somewhere in scope 3, I presume. I'd have to double check on that.
Yeah. I think we need to look more closely at our scope 3 emissions, because we're actually, like, our subsidiaries are doing that.
Yeah.
And I think we should be doing at least as good as our subsidiaries.
Yeah.
So that would be great. Thanks.
Righto. Councillor Johansson?
Yeah, thanks. As part of our tree policy, we're supposed to get annual reports to community boards on the number of trees being planted and removed. Is that work happening? Because I'm just mindful of another process around looking at trees when we've already got one established that doesn't seem to be going. So
I'd have to check.
We're working closely with Parks, so
on
I
that
assume
one.
that's all been...
That is part of the work we're doing in terms of assessing the trees, so it will be the same kind of data sets that we would be incorporating in there. But I don't know if anyone...
do you know what's taking
there.
so
So we'll
long?
come back, it'll be Parks and Transport, so we'll follow up on that.
Yeah, it might be quite good just so to make sure that we've got the same process going on. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. We'll go into debate. I'm just looking for a mover and seconder, but I've just got to nut out what we're doing, where and how. So what's up first, mate?
Okay, so currently we have no mover and seconder for the original officer recommendation. I have 3 different sets of amendments. The first from Deputy Mayor Cotter, the second from Councillor Templeton, 4 through 6 from Councillor Coker.
7. It should be 4.
It's, I'm just writing it down now. I'll follow up from it.
Can you scroll back up? Well, no, actually, your one is different than mine because I'm asking staff advice and then you're asking them to be included in, so I don't know. But I'd like to put employees and elected service.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
And 2. So it's got
Employees.
and elected members.
In that top line.
And number 2.
Yeah.
And elected members. Yep.
Thank you. And the mayor.
He's an elected member.
Just.
And
I'm conflicted on 5 or 6 from my own CCHR, so it's probably easier if I stand aside from those.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, could I make a suggestion on 5 and 6 that it be requesting staff advice,
Oh, yeah.
so we can work through that in a bit more.
The whole thing's advice, isn't it? So.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just a no.
be a bit more considered. Yeah.
Does that mean that you can?
I think if it's just asking for advice, I think I can. Yeah, if they're both just asking for advice, then I'll
Okay.
do the whole thing.
Yeah. Cool.
Sarah and Mel. Can we just roll all those into the substantive?
I suppose so.
Yeah, there's no need, they're all,
Aaron?
all of them.
Include.
Hang on. Now we're in debate now.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Have you got one more question?
yeah. Well, the question's just around these are our council's emissions, not like otherwise, because we supply most of the roads. So are we going to count all the vehicles that are on I mean, there's a whole lot of things, or we have a whole lot of ratepayers. What are their emissions? So putting in things like the port company and the airport is straying away. That's our district emissions. These are our emissions. And so if the staff can just clarify that is appropriate. Oh, they're gone.
So what you're saying that should be in the other report, not
It
this one.
should be in the other one, and that information should be gained for, and maybe that's the information that will come back from staff, is that you put it in the wrong.
On where it gets added into. So what you're saying, as long as it's recorded where it goes, it's either this or the other one a month or so ago.
Put some wording up on the other stuff.
That includes it.
Yes, and that we should include the data storage, our own, especially since I didn't vote for it, but this council voted to send it overseas.
Okay, right. So we're doing
Aaron, green.
debate. Who would like to?
Do you want one more amendment? Number 8. To request advice on including data on data storage. Emissions on data storage.
Can you repeat that, Deputy Mayor?
Request advice on emissions on data storage.
Should be busy.
We can have emissions from elected members better.
Long day. Okay.
All of these are being moved and seconded as a single, okay. I'm
We'll
sorry.
do it all together, but we want a bit of debate, do we?
Who's the mover and seconder?
Just briefly.
Really.
Sarah did say she could. Sarah Mel.
Thank you.
Kia ora, and thank you so much. It's a huge amount of work to actually go through this detail. I think that people underestimate how much time and effort and energy it takes to actually assess emissions. Once you look at one thing and then you dive down deeper and there's a whole pile of different standards, and then you're like, do you include 2 and 3 and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a huge amount of work, and it's ongoing and improving, and we'll include more things over time. We'll include a wider scope over time, but we're also adding facilities over time. And we've already had a rough estimate sort of set a couple of years ago on Te Kaha and its lifetime emissions. All of those things do add up over time, and it is difficult for a city organisation that runs a number of things to become emissions, zero emissions completely, which is why the net target is important. One of the other things that's coming up at the beginning of June is the reporting on the implementation of Kia Tūroa Te Ao, our climate resilience strategy. And so that will deal with some of the issues around the implementation of the strategy signed off last LTP and the various targets and implementation of that. It's not easy, and progress, I think, is slow, but it is underway. It's important that as a council we show leadership in this space. The commuting emissions, for example, our communities sometimes talk about us trying to help them make different choices around transport, and they want us to do the same. And I think it's important that we show leadership in that space. Many of our cyclists, as everyone will know who goes downstairs, many of our staff already take alternate ways to work. The bike stands are chock-a-block in the morning, and I know lots of people bus and stuff too. So, and there's carpooling. It's really good, but you manage what you measure. And once people start actually looking at their transport, and we do it as an organisation, there'll be different ways to do that. As an organisation, we gave a grant a couple of years ago, and the sustainability grant actually, to a company that is now WorkRide, which is now working with, I think, over 250 organisations nationwide, incentivising staff to get an e-bike and bike to work through a payroll deduction scheme. And I'd really like to see us picking up those kind of things, especially since we were the ones who helped them get off the ground. It'd be great if we were using that too. Thanks.
Right, me. Oh, sorry.
Yes,
You go.
No, the thing's been on the whole time. Before today, I was just thinking when I got elected in 2019, it was basically like 10 years away from 2030. Now it's almost 5, and I don't feel like we've made much progress. So this is, it's really important that we, especially with the LTP submissions that we've had, it's really important that we really think about our, climate change and our emissions and really take it seriously. With the resolutions, I mean, they are based on advocacy from Climate Liberation Aotearoa, and I think what they're trying to say, is something that we all should be thinking about. And when Graham said, that he won't fly to visit his family anymore because he doesn't want to pollute our atmosphere, taking plane across the world, I think that's incredibly commendable. I don't know about whether we're taking a financial control approach will help us reach our emissions any quicker. It'll make it much more challenging. But on the other hand, why hide from the truth? So I think that thinking about, the companies that we have and the ones that are creating the most emissions and not being afraid to face those things is something that we should be doing as a council. And it's something that the city should be doing, and it's something that the world should be doing, and we shouldn't be afraid to, think, well, we're just a small fish in a massive pond, but that doesn't mean that we can't lead and have policies and plans that actually do things that benefit the children of our future. Thanks.
Okay, my turn. The good thing about what we've got here is it actually lists the things that are bad, the worst thing, well, they're all there, but we should concentrate on hitting the big things first because that'll give us more bang for our buck faster. I'll go along with all this here, but I don't really agree that we should be spending staff should be spending a lot of their time on staff commute or working from home. Next thing you know, we'll be wanting to know if everyone eats organic bread and where do you stop? There's just, and you'll get to a point where the percentage that you're measuring is so small and it won't have any effect no matter what you do. We shouldn't forget that New Zealand is at the bottom of the world. We've had people in here jumping up and down the last wee while today that we should lower the amount of planes that are coming into Christchurch. We lower the amount of ships. My cousin actually works for a shipping outfit, and at the moment, refrigerated containers are coming to New Zealand empty because we export meet. Now, if we say, right, we're not going to have more, this is a waste of time, this is causing too much carbon, and we stop ships coming in, then we won't get our exports away. So be careful what we wish for. So that's all I'm worried about. And what we're talking about before, and we were quite nicely told, that we are now, and as Mel said, the number has gone up from when she started, say, 5 years ago, whatever, the percentage. Is that right, Mel? Yeah, right, it hasn't gone down. Okay, no, it hasn't gone down. That's fine. Now you've got to, and as you said, we're now measuring our wastewater a lot more accurately, right? Now, way back in the day, 5 years ago, we thought, oh, we're on a win here, and we can achieve this, and that's when we said, right, we'll lower our emissions by such. Now we're measuring it a lot better. The percentage has actually gone up because you're actually discovering a lot more bad stuff than then. Just use it. Yeah, but what I'm saying is it's here we are. We are doing a lot of work in trying to lower our emissions. But if we're measuring it better, or we can detect stuff better, it's hard work because the number's going up. But I'll support it. So with that, I will ask Councillor Templeton to. Oh, you got right a reply. Okay.
Well, that was quite quick. I think, I understand it's the balance we need. So it's not like no shipping, no flying.
I didn't say anything.
And the submitters this morning said exactly the same thing. Let's balance the economy and people's jobs. And also with our employees here, 2,500, don't underestimate that. If half of those people were driving and they all switched to buses and walking, that would have a really big impact. So sometimes it is the little things that can help. Was that quick enough?
Not quite, but you'll get away with it. Shush.
As I said earlier, showing leadership is really important. You do manage what you measure, and there is low-hanging fruit. And I think what the deputations were making really super clear today is that it's the frivolous and the luxury is that what we need to be focusing on to start with. The rest of it comes with a just transition and a planned way to transform our economy over a period of time. So it's unnecessarily travel, it's unnecessary sort of cruise ships and flights and those kind of things that they're focusing on, and not our core freight and exports. So it's not a knee-jerk reaction, it's just if we had started when we were asked to as a country and as a planet sort of 30, 40 years ago, the transition would be much less urgent than it is today.
Thank you. With that, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. Carried. Right. Moving on to number 15. Downstream effects. Or upstream effects, whichever way you want to look at it.